Hello, bonjour, good afternoon. Have folks all entering into the space, so we will get started in just a minute. Thank you so much for joining us today. I think we've got everyone filtering in. Hello again, bonjour. Very excited to be hosting this afternoon a webinar as part of our Climate Smart Forestry initiative here at SFI. This webinar is being recorded, so if you'd like to review or have access to the material later, just to let you know up front, this is being recorded and we'll make the material available on our website. Um, this is a part of a series of webinars, and again, this is part of our Climate Smart Forestry initiative. I did experience some mild technical issues right before this, so unfortunately, I will be asking my colleague Lindsay to advance slides on her short introduction here, so apologies for that. My PowerPoint was crashing on me. But very happy to have your time and thanks for joining us today. So next slide, please, Lindsay. Today we are looking at multiple adaptive management strategies, and we're taking a research to practice approach, which has really become a theme in our Climate Smart Forestry initiative, which I'll introduce in a moment. And so I'm Lauren Cooper. I am the Chief Conservation Officer here at SFI, and I lead this initiative and I lead our conservation programming. And so I'll be giving a brief introduction, but I'm going to then hand it to Trevor Jones from the Canadian Forest Service, who'll be giving an overview on adaptive silviculture for climate change as a research network, and specifically the work in the Petawawa Research Forest. And he'll be talking about managing for warmer and drier conditions in the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Forest region. And then we have Andre Murnau from the Nipissing Forest Research Management Unit, which is an SFI certified organization. And she's going to be covering integrating climate change into planning and practice. So very excited to hear from an SFI certified organization, and I'll touch on the requirements in our standard that Andre will be touching on as well. So next slide, please. And then and this is kind of this brief introduction here, we'll be ending with a Q&A. So I want to take a moment to let you all know we will listen to both of our presenters. We won't stop for questions in between, so I'm encouraging you to please utilize the Q&A function here. And because we won't stop for questions, if you have any questions, clarifications, observations, please feel free to share them at any time. We don't want you to forget any questions that you have or great comments. And then I will be organizing them and engaging with our speakers in a Q&A session at the end. So again, you're welcome to use the Q&A function. Is probably the easiest where everyone can see and we can organize them. If you have trouble locating that, you feel free to drop them in the chat and we can also organize them there as well. But just encouraging you again, put in any questions or comments at any point and we can organize them for a discussion at the end. And the next slide, please. So I'm just going to give a couple of brief updates on this Climate Smart Forestry initiative. I can see some familiar names, so I know that this may be review for some folks, so apologies for that. But we are going to introduce briefly some of the work that we're doing here, and then we have some exciting updates as well. Next slide, please. And so before I jump into that, just wanted to flag that we have our SFI annual conference in Montreal. So this is coming up already just next month. So we are in a countdown. We're really excited about the overall conference. We have great sessions lined up on wide-ranging topics, everything from market access and leadership, high-level dynamics in the forest sector, the role of certification. But we are leading a couple of sessions here in the conservation pillar and the conservation team. And particularly, next slide, please, Lindsay. We have a focus on our Climate Smart Forestry. And so Thursday morning is two back-to-back sessions where we're kind of following a similar theme here from science to practice. So we'll have two sessions, first engaging with a number of actors that are bridging science to practice in multiple ways, whether through collaborations, research initiatives, working with certified organizations or large-scale landowners in different ways. And then we'll have a session on forestry on the ground. And here we'll hear from a number of certified organizations about their work advancing climate smart forestry. So really similar flow that we'll have today, but it's a really wide range of perspectives that we're going to be bringing to the conference. And next slide. Okay, so the positioning here, we just want to orient you all. So we have definitely folks from within our SFI community that are very familiar with our standard objectives, but for those that are not, just want to orient us here that over here on the left, objective 9 is the climate smart forestry objective. And so this has requirements for mitigation and adaptation for our certified organizations in their forest management. And so I like to put up this slide. There's a lot of information and visuals here, but this slide is, I think, really important for highlighting that climate smart forestry for us is becoming increasingly important, and it's definitely an area that we have a lot of active research. We need to actively collaborate, partner to advance our understanding of how to manage our forests for future adapted climates or future adapted conditions. However, it's not alone. It's embedded in our standards, so it's really alongside these other values like conservation of biological diversity, the basics of sustainable forest management and planning, forest health and productivity. So there's a lot of overlap, and certainly fire resilience and awareness with longstanding values of sustainable forest management. But how do we bring in new information and science to make sure we're meeting challenges that are facing our forests today and into the future? Next slide, please. Thank you. And so here, it's just a snapshot of the Climate Smart Forestry Initiative. We'll have a QR code. We'd love for you to visit our website. We have a lot of additional information on our website as well. But really, the initiative is advancing the interpretation and implementation of principles and practices across our footprint and beyond. We're looking to collaborate and engage beyond our direct footprint, really to improve our forest understanding across the sector. But that enhances carbon sinks, reduces emissions, and advances metrics to measure success. And how do we actually improve forest resiliency? What does that look like? While we're also addressing co-occurring biodiversity crisis and a wildfire crisis as well. So we have a wide range of partners. This is really only a snapshot, and this is across the U.S. and Canada. So we have a large, kind of parallel efforts actually, and then there's some overlap. But really, we see this as very holistic across our entire footprint. So you'll see a mix of organizations, and these were some of our original partners when we were forming the initiative, but it's certainly extended well beyond this at this point. I'll take a moment to just recognize we have a wonderful advisory committee that has agreed to provide advisory support to us as we go forward and navigate these spaces. This is a handful of practitioners, professionals, experts from different sectors. So it does include certified orgs, academia, nonprofits, government entities that are working in this space. And it's been really wonderful working with these people. So I just want to take a moment to recognize them. And again, they're really just advising us and giving us recommendations, making sure we're taking a really robust approach while also being practical and understanding the challenges on the ground, cost constraints, really the realities of implementing these at scale, or these practices at scale. Just wanted to take a moment to recognize these individuals. We're bringing forward our work in a kind of a holistic way, looking at what are the range of practices that can be undertaken, and how do we bridge, again, with research and with activities that are being undertaken by our certified organizations. So we're advancing what we're calling climate-informed principles. We'll have more information on these as we continue to advance on this. And this is really an effort to kind of unpack this idea of, like, we have adaptation, mitigation requirements. How do we better articulate what the options are for forest practices, what the interventions can be, what some of the trade-offs are, and how do we understand what those practices mean in terms of climate benefits? So whether it's avoiding emissions or it's restoration, or we're improving management to keep more carbon on the landscape in the face of increased disturbances. there's a range of practices. And so we're really looking at how can we unpack and communicate more consistently about what the range of options are and how do we interpret them. Next slide, please, Lindsay. And so this is kind of going a little further. You can see we have this cycle of like assessing conditions, addressing them, and then how do you actually evaluate the effects? And so on the left-hand side, and we're happy to share this slide with anyone that'd like to spend a little more time in this. We'll continue to present on this and unpack it going forward. But on the left-hand side with assess, we're looking at having the appropriate inventory and ecological condition information to inform decisions. What is part of an appropriate and robust vulnerability assessment? How do we understand forest vulnerability? Greenhouse gas inventory and accounting, so assessing your greenhouse gas implications, and then having the appropriate cultural, social, economic context to maybe prioritize or weigh why you would have different interventions. In the center, here's what you would do to address. This is having all the robust input information. Then you have a range of options to address that. And that could be, what we're trying to unpack here is that some of these strategies can be layered. They could be prioritized for different reasons. And trying to lay this out in a way that shows that some of these are not mutually exclusive, that they can be layered or might be more appropriate depending on other values or priorities for a particular forest management unit. Or conservation area. So you could have adaptation planning, so looking at future adapted species, and also have conservation strategies. There's different silvicultural techniques that could be used across the board in those different areas. But we're also looking at what are opportunities to use slash and residuals in different ways. And of course, reducing disturbance, risk, and impacts are something that we're going to be touching on today as well. And because there's such a range of practices here, it becomes challenging to think of how do we actually assess what the impacts of these are. So there's this idea of how do we collaborate to better understand metrics and to monitor those outcomes. This is in part because the reality is there's a lot of great work happening in the forest sector on the ground, and it's not necessarily picked up at a higher level with just greenhouse gas accounting. There's like interventions, for example, that are undertaken because of a potential pest infestation, but it's hard to see that at a higher level. So how do we better communicate why different interventions are being taken so we can understand what is needed and support those forest managers on the ground and making informed decisions and having adequate resources to do that work. Next slide, please. And so just to briefly touch on this, we're really lucky to have a major award from Environment and Climate Change Canada to advance this work. There's a number of activities in here, and we actually have a sizable, really parallel effort in the United States. We're funding from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and both projects have a re-granting component. And so we have a multi-strategy approach. We're advancing, as part of it, we're advancing those climate-informed principles and practices. We have resources for workshops. There's a big emphasis on knowledge transfer, but we also have a re-granting or granting program in here that focuses on Indigenous partners and Indigenous-led climate smart forestry. Just wanted to take a moment to introduce this project, and if you're interested in learning more, there's information on our website, and we'd be happy to send you some overview documentation, but it's really provided a great foundation for us to emphasize this work and bring it forward. Thank you. And I just wanted to touch briefly on a couple of points here. I mentioned that we have the Indigenous-led climate smart forestry. This is one of our major strategies. And so we've been able to create a re-granting program that is supporting work in couple handfuls of First Nations at this point. We're very close to announcing our most recent funding recipients. And really looking to elevate the practices and the priorities with those partners on the ground. And then we have some work that we're doing to interpret these in terms of climate benefits and see what could be scaled, what is scalable, but also taking a practical approach. What's cost prohibitive? Where are there gaps that in terms of actually scaling? So sometimes we may have something that's a great idea, but it's not practical to have scaled for various reasons. So this is it's not as much of a research project, even though we're certainly hoping to learn a lot from this work. It's really about implementing and then learning in a practical sense about the limitations and opportunities to scale. I have a little more on the next slide as well. Um, so we had these are some examples of some of the practices and projects that we've supported with this work. So when we first announced the opportunity, we didn't want to be too prescriptive or narrow about the projects coming that could potentially come to us that we would like to support. And we also recognize a lot of communities or First Nations maybe wouldn't know what the climate implications would be of some of the projects they might like to see. So we used kind of broader language at first. And we have now supported a range of really wonderful projects that are everything from restoration, so post-disturbance, and thinking of future adapted species and restoration projects, alternative silvicultural approaches like retention harvest that has ecological benefits for priority biodiversity outcomes for First Nations. We're looking at alternative to herbicide application with one of our key partners. So very exciting range of projects, and we're really looking forward to elevating what we're learning and the work of those partners in those cases. Just wanted to make everyone aware of those. And then here's just kind of a quick snapshot. We had multiple requests for proposals in 2025. If you wanted to take a look at our previous press release, we announced the first round of funding recipients last year, and we're again about to announce the second round of funding. So we have over 10 Indigenous organizations. They're in BC, Ontario, and Quebec. And here's just a more detailed list of the types of projects that ultimately have been selected. So looking at different thinning applications, I think I've mentioned a fair number of these. So I just wanted to make everyone aware of this. Next slide, please. Another part of our project that we have some nice updates for everyone on is that we've had, as I mentioned, resources for workshopping and engagement. We'd love to hear from you if you have any collaboration opportunities or needs or ideas for some strategic entry points or where we should be headed next. We have our final year of this grant, and we're making some decisions now of priority topics. And we'd love to know if there's events that you're holding that we could collaborate on or provide support, or if there's topics that you think are priority areas that we can focus on. Here I have a snapshot of 3 workshop reports from projects that have been, or from workshops that have been supported by this project. And you can see the range of topics. So we have a report synthesis with our colleague, Dr. Lamugan Samo at McMaster University in his lab, where we had a dialogue on measuring forest management for climate mitigation, and what are some of the challenges and opportunities at scales of measurement. So what can we measure and what do we know at a forest management unit? And then how is that challenging to capture at a national or a provincial scale? Versus what do we know at a national scale that is actually difficult to bring down to the local level. So it was a really interesting conversation, especially when we see all these tech advancements in the forest sector. How do we really collaborate and figure out how to communicate across these scales? We then had a great opportunity to partner with Silva 21. We have Dr. Alexia Sham. I'll mention again because he's on our advisory committee specifically. But this is the Silva 21 Research Collaborative. We co-hosted their annual general meeting, their 4th annual general meeting. So really wonderful experience. And there's a summary report of what we learned there. Just a really excellent research community from both Université Laval and UBC. And I got Amy Witherspoon in our attending here. So great job, Amy, on that. It was wonderful collaborating with you on that. And then last, this example, we have a report synthesis of a dialogue on Indigenous-led climate smart forestry. So we had a dialogue with some of our first round our grantees. And we have a conceptual figure you can't see too well here, but just bringing forward some values that we're using to underpin our work on climate smart forestry with our Indigenous partners, and encourage you all to take a look at that. It's definitely an area of growth for us, and we're really grateful for the opportunity to collaborate and learn alongside our Indigenous partners. And so next slide, please. Those are available. Oh, and I do have a zoom in on this. A little bit of a teaser, but here we have guiding principles with actions and kind of recommendations that came from that group that we've distilled into that report. Okay, next slide. And then this is just a little shout out for the webinar series. So if you're interested in learning more from our, excuse me, previous 2 webinars, There's a QR code, but again, this is on our website. This webinar will go there as well. And so we've had a couple of sessions, and we're going to be advancing these across the U.S. So if you're not on our email list, you'd like to be, please join, and you'll be sure to get news and updates. So this is my kind of full overview. I'll drop a link in the chat to that website as well, since I covered a lot of information. And I'm really happy now to hand it over to Trevor, who's already been a great contributor to our effort. And it's great to always have a chance to learn more about the work that he's been doing for many years. So Trevor, thank you so much for being here, and I'll hand it over to you. Thank you.
I don't. How's that?
Perfect.
You good?
Yep.
It's always questionable. All right. So, hi everyone. I'm Trevor Jones. I'm a research scientist with the Canadian Forest Service outside at Sault Ste. Marie in Ontario. Talk to you a little bit about our Adaptive Silviculture Climate Change project is one of a sort of nodes of the ASCC project across North America. And our project is in Petawawa Research Forest, which is just outside of Ottawa, Ontario. So our ASCC research team is pretty diverse. We have researchers and forestry officers and technicians, and we have a lot of students and visiting sort of researchers and people that help us with our project. And so couldn't have been done without them. So I'd like to thank them right off the hop. I'm going to try and talk pretty quickly here because we've got a lot of stuff to cover. So the ASCC project recognizes that there's more than one way to adapt to climate change, and that approaches can range from trying to perpetuate current conditions to accepting some change, or to moving on to a different and more climate adapted state. The theory is that as climate change advances, maintaining current conditions will become more and more difficult, and it'll take more and more money and effort in order to maintain those species compositions, forest types, etc. So this framework uses this ASCC research framework, which was developed by Linda Nagel et al. Back in 2015-16, and really uses the resistance resilience transition treatments within to demonstrate how change can occur. So resistance aims to perpetuate the same forest type, but at the same time using tactics to improve defenses or reduce risks. Resilience allows for more change in the system, but will still basically perpetuate the same types of forests with greater ability to rebound from disturbances and things like that. And then transition treatments are really embracing change and changing the forest condition to something that's different. So maintaining a lot of the same sort of ecological values and things, but looking different. Change. And so our site is in the Petawawa Research Forest, which is that center pin. There's 11 core sites in the ASCC network, 3 affiliated sites, and 2 Canadian sites, Petawawa and the John Prince Forest. Okay. And so for us in the Petawawa Research Forest and Petawawa in general, the climate is changing. It has been changing. And our concerns really are that sort of mean annual temperatures going up. We're anticipating that precipitation will also increase. But because of the increases in temperature, we're expecting water balance to be a problem. And so we have this thing called climate moisture index that we use to determine the drought stress. And we see that sort of over time, our stress to water loss is increasing. And so if you look at this last figure on the right-hand side, if you get to 0, that's pretty much the point where you can no longer maintain closed canopy forests. And so in this sort of RCP 8.5 scenario, we're getting pretty close to that state, and that's not good. So PRF, again, is where the research is taking place. Mostly white pine, dominated forests, sandy soils, uh, in the northern part of the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Forest, maybe into the boreal transition area. Um, and so at the research forest, our treatments for resistance is a uniform shelterwood harvest, basically mechanical site prep and planting white pine. The resistant component of this is really looking at sort of assisted migration and really looking at sort of adding a whole bunch of different seed sources from further southern seed source locations that match future climate zones. And so we're giving it sort of diversity of genetics and trying to increase sort of climate resistance through, you know, better climate adapted seed for white pine. Um, the resilience treatment is a little bit different. So it's an irregular shelter wood, which in our case is an expanding gap, irregular shelter wood, where 20% of the block is treated. And so we're really trying to sort of create uh, resilience by increasing structural diversity, but also increasing species diversity by increasing the amount of deciduous we have in there and moving some southern seed sources into the area. And so with the expanding gap, every 15 years, 20 years, it allows us to do some adaptive management, see what's working and what's not, and make some changes on the fly. The transition treatment is really a clear cut with seed tree. I know it looks in that picture like it's a shelter wood, but that's what our seed trees look around here. And so really looking at changing species composition away from white pine and bringing in southern sources, so longer distance migration seed sources, uh, and primarily pitch pine and white oak from southern seed zones. In all the experiments, there's a no action control, which do nothing. That's not really a good analog for us. So for us, we have this business as usual control, which in white pine is a uniform shelter wood, where we plant local red and white pine in the area. And so this is sort of what industry standard is. And so if we want to make policy changes in Ontario and in Canada, we have to sort of compare them to what the industry is doing already. And so it's really important that we understand if there's incremental change with our treatments and what that change is so that we can determine whether or not it's a sustainable practice or not. Um, so one of the big issues we had in our adaptive silviculture trial was seed acquisition. We're using a bunch of assisted migration, and we really want to grow sort of uh, forests of tomorrow. And so finding seed from southern seed sources and southern locations was a really big part of this. And we used the Forest Team Conservation Authority to help us with this, and they were awesome. And probably the best money I've ever spent as a scientist in my entire life was contracting them to help us. So if you have any sort of seed sourcing problems, they're your people. Go find them. Um, and so, as you said, we have a seed selection strategy where we're using different assisted migration techniques. And so those are sort of assisted population migration, so within range, assisted range expansion, so sort of moving slightly above the range of the current range, and then long distance migration. So for seed sourcing and procurement, we modeled where to find our seed using the seedware model by McKinney and Pedler and all. And basically it told us where to look for our seeds from different sort of climate envelopes that we're looking for. So our three climate envelopes were 2011 to 2040, 2041 to 70, and 2070 to 2100. So those are sort of the basic windows where we were looking for climate that matched those climates that match those future the future conditions of Petawawa. Um, and so this is sort of a map that shows where all of our seed sources were coming from. As you can see, that wasn't necessarily directly south. A lot of it came sort of south and west, basically because we expect it to be warmer and drier, and sort of continental US fits that bill to do. So seed sourcing was a challenge, as we said before. Local seed orchards still supplying their current customers, and so they don't always have seed. Seed crop was a problem. Finding oaks, for example, was almost impossible. There was no good oak acorn crop in northeast of North America. So really a problem. Um, and just because the area that we wanted to work from was predicted doesn't mean that there's seed source available from there. And so we had to move around a little bit to find seed sources uh, that were present, and it was a bit of a challenge. On top of that, there's some sort of uh, political boundaries that made things a little bit more difficult to bring seed into Canada, and particularly transporting of seed was problematic across borders and between sort of jurisdictions. So things to keep in mind. So the progress really was we started sort of setting stuff up in 2019 and did a harvest in 21, 22, and then did site prep and planting and stuff in 23, and we're measuring things every 3 to 5 years moving forward. So the harvest looks something like this. It was 134 hectares, harvested around 20,000 cubic meters of material, and had a harvest revenue of $385,000 approximately. We did some mechanical site preparation, we did some chemical site preparation. We did a whole bunch of planting of all of our assisted migration seedlings. In total, we planted over 170,000 seedlings, 12,000 of which we follow individually through time. So the approximate cost of the silviculture was around $250,000, which is probably nowhere near what it would cost today, but that's what it was then. So that gave us a little bit of a profit, but you should keep in mind that we have another tending that we're going to have to do, and that'll cost probably closer to $500 per hectare at this point. And so we're looking at some significant costs, sort of in around that $45,000, $50,000 again. So what does the harvest say? Well, to nobody's surprise, when you cut down trees, the basal area is reduced, and so this is confirmation of that. That's the least surprising result in science. But the good thing to know is that our treatments sort of basal areas went around sort of what you would expect, with the transition having the lowest basal area and the resistance and BAU having approximately the same. The sapling density also, glad to see that it went down. In a perfect world, sapling density in these treatments would have been zero, because we would knock down all those little things because they're a liability to silviculture and taking up growing space and light, and we don't want them there. But this is real world silviculture, and that happens. And then we have coarse wood debris volume, which really is looking at sort of what was left on site afterwards. And you see that the BAU and resistance treatments had a lot of, and the transition had a lot of material left on site. 100 meters cubed per hectare is like a lot of material for Great Lakes St. Lawrence forests. The resilience treatment is a little bit of a sneaker in there, because when we did the harvest in the gaps, we pushed all the tops and branches out of the gaps. And so the stuff that was left on site is not being measured, and so it doesn't look like there's a change. But trust me, there's lots of tops and branches out there to hurt yourself on. So the planted seedlings, as I said, we followed 12,000 seedlings across all the planting treatments, and we measured growth and mortality of these seedlings over time. So the business as usual treatment has red pine and white pine seedlings planted in it, and basically this is our sort of industry standard. And so we have pretty low mortality in around that 10-15%. And the growth is, after 2 years, 40 centimeters in height. Really satisfying to see this happen, and good to know that it's pretty successful considering we've been doing this for 20 years, and it'd be really disheartening to be crappy at it after that much time. So looking more at the assisted migration species. So this is the resistance treatment, which is that uniform shelter wood. Looking at the four different sources of white pine, and what you can see is that, regardless of where the pine is from, they seem to have sort of that 15 to 20% mortality rate, and growing at that 30 to 40 centimeters over the last 2 years. And so no real differentiation yet. It's still pretty early. There's lots of regen growing in that site. And so chaos will ensue, I'm sure, and we'll have some better results in 5 years. The resilience treatment, which is in those gaps, is really looking at sort of a bunch of different species. And so we have two species of white pine, two sources of white oak and of red oak, and then white oak. And so we're looking at sort of progressively increasing sort of mortality as we get in towards the deciduous species. Everything in the forest loves to eat white oak. And so we have a lot of rodent damage and things like that, moose browse and everything eats white oak. I don't know anything that doesn't love white oak. And so yeah, a little bit high mortality, but if we found them and they were growing, they were doing okay. Um, skip over that. Some of the transition treatment, which is where we put in this pitch pine. Pitch pine was a little bit of an interesting one in that if it survived on the sites, and some of these sites are pretty hot, it did really well. Like some of them were a meter tall after 2 years. And so, while there was some risk associated with sort of adding these sort of very southern sort of off-site species, they seemed to be doing well if they got established. And so that was the same for some of the red oak and white oak as well. So they had higher risk of mortality, but you know, their output and growth and it was pretty good. Um, and so overall, the non-local species established and are growing well. The local pines have good survival and growth so far. Um, Going forward, we don't really know if these trends will continue. We expect that there might be some differentiation between the seed sources over time. And there's certainly going to be some competition effects. There's a whole bunch of nuances to the way we developed our study. And so we have sort of topographic wetness built into our study along a gradient. And so there will be probably some soil moisture effects as well going on there, which we're looking forward to disentangling over time. And so some of the other ongoing work is really sort of how is our site doing compared to the other ASC sites? And so that's to be determined. So anyways, if you have any questions for us, I know that was lightning fast and maybe over time, but hopefully reach out to one of us and we should be able to answer your questions. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Trevor. It's a really great overview, and I really appreciate the kind of technical deep dive for all of our foresters joining us today because we have a lot to learn from this work, and it's really shows a lot of conceptual leadership also to be part of this larger network. So as a reminder, if there's any questions or comments, please pop them in, and we'll hopefully circle back to as much as we can. So now I will though hand it over to Andre, who will be able to give us a perspective from the implementation side of things and how we're putting work into practice.
Hello, I'm just going to try and get this thing going here.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
There. Okay. All right. Well, thank you. First of all, thanks for inviting me to be part of this webinar. It's really interesting. It's always exciting to share what we're doing out here in the forest. Often we feel like we're out there working on our own and nobody knows. So this is great. Yeah, my name's Andre Morneau. I'm a registered professional forester, and I work as a silviculture forester with a company called Nipissing Forest Resource Management. These pictures here just to show that when we work in the forest, we often see really, really beautiful things. So as long as we get up early and we stay out late. Anyway, Nipissing Forest is located near North Bay, Ontario. So it's kind of in the middle of Ontario. And we have a big lake in the middle of our forest called Lake Nipissing, and we border with Quebec. And there's the Ottawa River kind of flows along here. The Petawawa Research Forest is kind of like where my pointer is now. So we're in the same forest region, the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Forest. The Nipissing Forest is almost 1 million hectares, well, a little bit over 1 million hectares in size, of which roughly half is productive forest. We have quite a bit of people living on our forest, roughly 90,000 people, and so they're all out recreating and enjoying the forest on the weekends and during hunting season and so on. So we have quite a few people going around in the forest. And so, yeah, so that creates some interesting conversations. Um, we've been certified under FSC since 2003 and under SFI since 2014. And we have regular surveillance audits. We have one coming up here in May, and they're usually done jointly because several of the indicators are similar, and so it's good to have them done at the same time. And on silviculture, we spend roughly $1.4 million every year, and that money is not government money. It's money that's kind of put aside in a trust by forest industry through the stumpage system. The company was established in 1995, and it's issued a sustainable forest resource license. That was in 96. So that gives us the right to manage the forest on behalf of the Ministry of Natural Resources. And the Ministry of Natural Resources monitors what we do and make sure that we're managing the forest properly and sustainably. And that allows us to maintain our license to manage the forest. Our company is run by it's a cooperative SFL, so it's a cooperative between large corporations and family-run businesses. So we have, yeah, really a lot of different sizes of businesses. It's not all run by one forest company. And as part of our job, we're responsible for forest management planning and reporting, for harvesting, for renewing the forest, and for doing monitoring, including compliance and sort of free to grow surveys or establishment surveys. So when it comes to the SFI Objective 9, we approach it through both planning and practice. So in our 2019 to 2029 forest management plan, we addressed climate change through a bunch of different ways. One, that we really focus on management activities that are above and beyond our regular forest practices that will enhance the resiliency of the forest to climate change. So that's spoken about in the FMP. We're really looking at an adaptive management process. So we monitor, and then if we need to, we change what we're doing, and we change things inside the plan so that the plan can address climate change differently if we're finding that we need to. And because the forest management plan is renewed, there's a new plan every 10 years, and there's also a midterm evaluation. So we're able to, we have the opportunity to respond to challenges and risks frequently. So that's really good to have that periodic planning cycle. We follow the latest science and work with partners. So Trevor is one of our partners. We follow what he's up to, and we participate in the work that they're doing at Petawawa by participating in workshops and contributing to, our experience and knowledge and helping to develop like the treatments and different things. So we've been kind of participating in that study, and we're always very eager to have field tours to go see what's going on and to keep up with the results. And we do that with other researchers as well. And we really encourage researchers to come and work on our forest. We find that really helps us keep up with what's going on. And as Trevor mentioned, one of our key partners is the Forest Gene Conservation Association. They're located in Southern Ontario, but they are, really the gurus of anything having to do with seed and genetics and conservation. And they're a great group to work with. We really enjoy working with them. Oops, come on. I'm having trouble advancing my slide. Okay, no, here it is. Okay, so one of the parts where we look at practice and we have a measurable indicator is our objective 16. And so that's to improve the resilience of the forest to possible effects of climate change. And there's basically 4 strategies there. First one is we want to establish a seed production area from climate appropriate seed zones. So we haven't done that yet. We have to try and find an area that's suitable, and not all sites that we harvest are suitable for this. So we're waiting on it still. We're always on the lookout for the right site where we can plant seedlings from a southern seed source and then, use that as a future seed production area. We're also supplementing our planting programs with tree seedlings from southern seed zones. So we have an indicator there of having 10% of our seedlings come from using seed from southern seed zones that we're planting out in our operational sites. And so we have been working on that, and I'll touch on that in a couple minutes. And the Forest Gene Conservation Association really helped us develop a strategy, and we identified seed zones and seed sources for all the different seedlings that we plant, the species. So we plant jack pine, red pine, white spruce, and red spruce mostly. And so we've got a chart now showing where we can get seeds that can be used to address this sort of assisted migration. And then one of the other ones is we always plant a mix of species, which we've been doing pretty regularly just because our sites are fairly variable. But it's definitely a very deliberate strategy now to make sure we don't just plant one species out there. So just to address the assisted migration, so it's planting seedlings using seed from southern sources. We use the Ministry of Natural Resources seed transfer policy and follow that. And it's a really good tool to identify where those seeds should come from in order to be adapted to future climate. And we partner with the Forest Gene Conservation Association to help us get that seed. Our focus so far has been on white pine, and we started doing this in 2020. So the seed transfer policy, it ensures that the seed used to regenerate forests has a reasonable probability of producing trees that are adapted to their growing environment now and in the future. So, and it specifies where the seed can be collected and where it can be used and under what conditions we can transfer it. So it's really a very clear policy. It was really nice to obtain that. As part of the policy, they've produced this tool on the Tableau Public, which allows us to do some gaming. So, for example, in this slide, you can see that the diamond, not the diamond, but the triangle there up just north of Lake Nipissing. So that would be our forest. And when we query it, it says that if we want to plant trees in that area, these are where we should get. This is where we should get our seeds. And anything that's darker is more suitable. And so anything from seed zone 36, 35, 31 are very, very good seed sources. And they have a 90%, the climate there is 90% similar to the climate we're going to see here in the future. And so, so this tool is really useful for us to target where we want to get our seed in order to plant in our forest. So some of the examples of where we've done this. So our first time was in spring of 2020, and it was an opportunistic plant. During COVID, there was a forest that wasn't able to plant their trees because of COVID. And so we found out about it, and we purchased their trees. That came from a seed zone 32. And so that was, a really good opportunity for us to start the program. And so we planted these, the trees were grown at Milson's up in Timmins. They were planted by Brinkman Reforestation, and they were planted in a clear cut in our seed zone 26. And so one of the areas here was 36 hectares. And there we had both red pine and white pine from the seed zone 32. And so in the first one, we put the white pine from seed zone 32 and planted it almost in a 50-50 mix with red pine from seed zone 26. So we know when we go into that area that all the white pine that's there is from the southern seed source. And so that's the way we're able to kind of monitor what's going on there. And in each of these plantations, we put a temporary sample plot, which is which we use to monitor the growth and survival of seedlings. And then in the bottoms here, in this 27 hectares, we did the reverse. So there we put all the red pine that were from the southern seed zone 32 and mixed it with a white pine from seed zone 26. So now we know when we walk in that area that all the red pine that we're looking at are from the southern seed source. So that's the way we're able to monitor it over time. Anyway, I'll skip over this, but this is another example of where we did this, and we actually went into seed zone, 37 and 35 in this area. So again, all the ones from the seed zone 35 or 37 are the white pine, and all the other species are from our local seed zone. So we know again, when we go in there, all the white pine are going to be from the southern seed source. And so just to summarize, we started in 2020 and we're ongoing. We've planted so far 214 hectares of these southern seed zones and 150,000 seedlings. So, we're at 3% now of what was planted between, I don't know why I have 19 there. It's actually 2020 to 2025. And then this coming spring and in a month from now, we have 6% of the trees that we're planting are from a southern seed source. So things are moving along. Our target is 10%, but as long as we're moving towards that target, we're pretty happy about that. Anyway, so that's all for me.
It's really, really interesting. The practical, outlook is really exciting. It's thank you so much for sharing the details and the targets. How you're approaching this and thinking about this is really amazing to see it in practice. So first of all, thank you to both of you. I think it's such a nice kind of flow into just how we're approaching this topic and into our work here at SFI. So it's been really great collaborating with you both. I thought maybe, and we don't have any key questions in the chat right now, so I'm happy to take an opportunity to ask you something on my own. I thought maybe you could expand for us just a little bit, how you've gone about, it sounds like Andre, you've relied on some existing tools to think about where seed sourcing and the appropriate species. But Trevor, you had mentioned that you've identified some other sites. They're not just directly south. And I wonder if you could both expand on that a little bit, just maybe some of the internal processes or what's gone into that identification of the appropriate species in the area. And again, Andre, you might have relied more on a tool, but I'd be happy to hear more of your thoughts on that. And Trevor, could I start with you? Just sharing, just a little more on what went into that.
Yeah, so I blew over that section pretty quickly because it's pretty
I know, might be a
challenging.
big question.
So, so we use a program called Seedware, which does climate matching. And basically it says, in the future, those climate envelopes that we specified, where will Petawawa's future climate look like if it was today? And so basically it says in 2041 or 2011 to 2041, it would be just slightly south. And the longer it goes on, sort of the more south and west it gets. And so basically we use that model, which is a Natural Resources Canada sort of CFS model, that just gives you a indicator of sort of where the future climate for Petawawa is right now. And so by knowing that, we can do the same thing as Andre did and just try and find seed sources that are sort of in or close to that sort of climate match zone, and then acquire our seeds from there. And so pretty sort of similar approach is done in the US. They have their own models, but it's something that we uh, that FGCA did with us. They did all the sort of seedware modeling and located all of the sources of seed for us. And so we were pretty hands off on that process, other than telling us what the climate envelope we were looking for, like the years, the windows and the years, and then what species we're looking for to get from those climate envelopes. And so they took that and ran with it, and we'd still be looking for seed if it was up to us. So, um,
Well, we've heard that that is a challenge, and that I think that's something that we'll have to continue to collaborate on as a sector going forward. And it's great that you had a solution there and had an experience. I think there's more we can learn from them as well on how they were able to achieve that.
yeah. And
And then, oh, go ahead.
just knowing the people on the
Yeah.
landscape makes a huge difference. And so having their network of contacts across Canada and the US, and knowing seed orchards and the people that run them was really sort of key for them, I think. And so, yeah.
Right, that's great. Yeah, and a quick follow-up question: do you know offhand? It sounds like this a federally backed tool, so Natural Resources Canada. Do you know if it has the same level of like usefulness or applicability in Quebec?
Yeah, I think so. It's a Canadian tool, so it'll work for whatever coordinates you put into Canada, and it's mapped climates across sort of all of North America.
Okay.
One of the things you got to be careful with it, though, is that it doesn't take into account things like soil and stuff like that. And so you got to be sort of a little bit careful about sort of it's only matching climate. It doesn't match sort of anything else really. And so, buyer beware with a lot of these sort of climate matching sort of future predicting models, is that you got to know what's going into them and be okay with it. And the other thing is it has a lot of indices that it can use to make those predictions. And so climate moisture index and things like that are some of the indices that we use to predict our sort of future climate locations. So,
Thanks for that. That's a great point. Really helpful to have the guidance of how to utilize the tool. And I did drop a link to that in the chat for everyone's benefit. So should be easy to look at and play around with. So Andre, do you mind answering a similar question for us? Just what was your internal decision making process? How did you explore different tools? And then we do have a question from Aaron, which is related. Do you have a preference on using Seedware tool versus the Ontario Seed Transfer Policy Interactive Map? So just unpack that for us a little bit.
Yeah, so Seedware, so the seed transfer tool also uses Seedware, so it just packages it up in a user-friendly method. So the model and all that, sort of climate mapping and everything is all kind of in there. So it just yeah, so it's basically the same model, but then they created a tool with it to make it easier to make decisions and to see. So you can pick where you are and where you're going to get your seed, but you can also see where you're collecting your seed. So if you're collecting local seed, where would it be useful in the future? So then you can approach those companies further north and say, hey, we got some seed for you if you want to plant climate smart trees. So that's kind of how we went with that. Um, yeah, it worked for us that way.
Nice. It's always kind of a relief to learn that it's not a totally different tool that you're using, that it's the same tool, because that's one of the challenges is when people are learning about new tools or resources, it's kind of doing a deep dive, like what's in this and how would I apply it? And so knowing that there's some alignment there already is a bit of a relief. So that's great to clarify that for us. I know that we're kind of or at our time here, but I wanted to say just Trevor and Andre, I don't know if you have any kind of closing thoughts or recommendations on us going forward. What should be our big takeaways as we're kind of a diverse forestry community here? How can we keep learning about your work, or how should we be collaborating? What's been some of the most useful kind of collaborations for you?
From field forester point of view is just yeah, keep up with the research, carry on with the networks, just use the resources that are out there, because we can't develop our own sources of information. We can't develop all, just for example, for the FGCA, like they have all that network. So let's use them in order to help access all that network. So and then keep up on the latest research and see what's going on. Like the chances that we're going to plant white oak here tomorrow are pretty slim, but as time goes on, it may show up to that, hey, that's what we need to go for, pitch pine. So we'll just keep an eye out on what Trevor's doing and see what they have to recommend in the future.
And I would say exactly the opposite is that stay grounded in sort of the operational sort of side of forestry and make sure we're checking in sort of regularly with them and seeing what they're doing and sort of making sure that what we're doing is relevant to them is super important and that, is applicable. And we know that sort of our research is like decadal, and so can spend careers on individual projects, but just making sure that, when you start it, we're consulting with them and sort of they have some input into what we're doing and why we're doing it and how we're doing it. And just certainly for our ASK project, it's operational scale. And so they were involved from the beginning, and Andre was there sort of in our workshop, sort of telling us what we should and should not do, and it was great to have, and we continue to lean on them, and it's super important. And so those collaborations are important. And the other thing I think, sort of moving forward, is like I think this idea of these sort of climate adapted seed orchards that Andre and others have mentioned is something that we really probably need to focus on, sort of in Ontario and in Canada, given sort of the rate of climate change and the difficulty of getting seed and sort of the how sort of the climate envelopes are changing. Makes sense to sort of start some orchards now that'll provide seed for the future because we're going to be in a challenging spot if we don't do that. And so reach out to the industry and put that little bug in their ear to say, hey, you know, this is something that might be a good idea. And you know, if you want some help with it, reach out and I'll point you in a different direction.
I think it is a great recommendation, and I will say I'm really excited about kind of the unique role that maybe SFI can play in helping to bridge as the research community can be really busy and focused on your day-to-day deliverables, and then we have our certified organizations that are of course focused on their day-to-day objectives, and how can we provide some support in creating those extra connections that are can hopefully provide some of the extra capacity. So I appreciate the opportunity to engage with you both today in that way, and we're excited about how your work is both really something that we can draw from and contribute to the Climate Smart Forestry Initiative, which is really not intending to duplicate any efforts at all. It's really looking at how do we elevate and learn from the work that's happening on the ground and create like peer learning and engagement opportunities and practical solutions, as you said as well, Trevor. So appreciate that. So with that, I know we're a few minutes over, so we'll wrap up here. Just as some kind of closing, we have a little extra tag here. We'd love to have you join our email list for participants if you're not on there yet. We have multiple ways to get involved. Scan our QR code that'll bring you to our website, annual conference coming up, and any suggestions or ideas that you have for us are most welcome. So again, I will thank you, Andre, Trevor. It was really fun interacting with you on preparing for this, and really grateful for the time that you spent in preparations and sharing your expertise with us. So thank you very much. I hope everyone has a good rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Take care, everybody.